So you guys are always asking me, hey Sticks, what are the best free-to-play MMORPGs right now? So let's take a few minutes and talk about that. So 2020 just started and already I am being bombarded via both Twitter and YouTube comments asking me, hey, what should I be playing? So with that in mind, I figured, you know what? Hey, I am gonna make a top free-to-play MMORPG video featuring what I believe subjectively are the best free-to-play MMORPGs to begin at the beginning of 2020. Now, granted, you might disagree with one of the games in the list, or you might disagree with all of the games in the list, and you're more than welcome to. But if you take a moment or two to go down in the comment section and list your games, the games that you believe should be listed here, along with, of course, why you would choose those games, then you might find the occasional viewer browsing through the comments happening upon your comment. Not only does this make you kind of like a contributor in essence, but it may also help future players that are coming into the genre for the first time find a game that they wouldn't have otherwise found. And no, Phantasy Star Online 2 will not be included in this list, not because it's not worth being included, but with Microsoft having announced that it will be launching in a few months, I cannot in good faith include it yet until I have played the North American version after it's actually released. Now I will include it, or at least will potentially include it once it launches in a follow-up video later on in the year. Now I'm going to go ahead and start this off with what is arguably the best free-to-play MMORPG available right now. And while I say it is free-to-play, I will note that the expansion content requires a single-time purchase. While it isn't necessary to purchase the expansions to play the entire base game, if you ever want access to additional content, you will have to buy those expansions. Thankfully, they're pretty cheap. The reason I believe Guild Wars 2 is worthy of being called the best free-to-play MMO is because it's kind of like an amalgamation of the best aspects of the genre combined to make a truly remarkable gaming experience. The game looks beautiful, your character, while not nearly as detailed as several South Korean MMOs, looks highly detailed. There's a lot of fashion that makes for more than necessary amounts of customization, and the world itself is filled with personality. The game plays fantastically as well. Not only is the game a very fluid MMO, but it also has very intuitive action combat, featuring a system that has you swap between various weapon types to maximize damage and allows for a little strategy when tackling encounters. It has a highly active PvE scene and has one of the friendliest communities I have ever been a part of. Seriously, I cannot begin to express how friendly this community is. Like seriously, everyone is just out around helping one another progress through the game, combat things they wouldn't be able to otherwise. I don't know, it's just something that I haven't really encountered before. People might say that communities in MMOs are toxic, but with the exception of Final Fantasy XIV, I have never seen so many helpful individuals grouped together willing to take the time out of their day to assist you in whatever you're doing. So Kritika was originally shut down earlier last year by en masse. A lot of fans, myself included, were pretty disappointed with that news. However, it relaunched back in November 2019 under the original developer, who opted to self-publish it in the West. This was the right decision, as not only did they have access to content that en masse didn't, but they didn't need a publisher making alterations to the game that they didn't want. As people noted, upon playing the game, XP rates were better, things moved faster, and it was much less of a repetitious grind. The game itself is actually one of the better hub-based action MMOs out there, so knowing this makes it a much better experience to play through. The game has beautiful graphics, albeit the instance zones are a little uninspired at times. The combat is very fast and incredibly flashy, however my main issue was that encounters early on were very easy. While that isn't really a concern the further you get through the game, as it makes clearing early game content much faster than it would be otherwise, I know some people are likely going to judge the difficulty off of the introduction to the game. The player base is steady right now, having several thousand players online concurrently, which is pretty good considering it launched a few months ago and people who didn't enjoy it have likely already abandoned ship. Don't let the graphical style of RuneScape dissuade you from trying it out. While people may argue that this or that MMO is better, there is no denying that RuneScape and old school RuneScape, yes, I'm kind of clumping the two together as one in this mention, total over 100,000 active players concurrently. Yes, I know some of them are bots. People tell me that the majority of the active players are bots, but I find that kind of hard to believe. Despite its population, which makes it the #1 most populated free-to-play MMORPG, just an FYI, the game is one of the older MMOs still around, having released back in January 2001. Yeah, no joke. RuneScape might actually be older than quite a few of you guys. Both RuneScape and old school RuneScape have decades worth of content split between the two iterations of the game, providing more to do than you could ever begin to know what to do with. Graphically, I cannot deny that both versions do look kinda dated, but we all know that good graphics don't make for a good game. Both graphics and combat are just parts, cogs in the overall machine. Combat is tab target. Well, I mean, like, it's kind of tab target, as you ironically can't actually bind a cycling to the tab key, or couldn't at least when I played it last. Honestly, there are always so many players around. There's such a large community, and it's just, if you're looking for a long-term MMO, then trust me, RuneScape is the game for you. For Albion Online, I will be the first to admit that I have not dedicated nearly enough time into the game as I would have liked to be able to really give like any kind of official review on it. Regardless, love it or hate it, you cannot deny that thousands of active players the game has concurrently playing make for a very popular game. It wasn't really for me though, as the game has a pretty large focus on not only PvP, but also on crafting. And while I am a big fan of PvP in games, I hate crafting. Like, okay, I don't hate crafting, I've just never really been a fan of crafting. See, I would often prefer to have people craft like gear and items for me, and then I would pay them for their time and their services. Yes, I am honestly that lazy. Graphically, Albion kinda, I don't know, it resonated with me. I'm a sucker for low poly graphical styles, and having a world that looks as unique as this does was quite a treat. Combat was, interestingly enough, tab target. When I played through it, I had a lot of trouble as I didn't really fully grasp the game. But honestly, if you pay attention and take a little time to, unlike what I did in 2018, then you shouldn't have any issues. Seriously though, I really do need to do a follow-up video on this game, because the last video I did was like 2 years ago, maybe just slightly under 2 years ago. The player base is pretty active, but I know there are a lot of players that complain about certain guilds and alliances monopolizing territories to the point where you're unable to really farm higher tier resources without the threat of being ganked. That's where the whole PvP focused aspect of the game kinda killed my interest, but if you're into open world PvP in specific zones, then this will probably be right up your alley. I always make an active effort to include Mabinogi in my lists of free-to-play MMORPGs. Not because I'm a biased fan of the game, but because to date, this single game has provided one of the most unique experiences the genre has ever had. Thankfully, even though Nexon are a bunch of douche pickles, they have opted to keep the game online. Yeah, it doesn't have the population it once had, granted, but nevertheless, if you haven't played it, then you are missing out on an experience unlike any other. The game is still one of the greatest anime MMOs I have ever played, and I have been playing these for about 15 years now. Mabinogi is generally referred to as the social MMO, or what a real-life simulator would be. It provides so much more than your ordinary MMO, and I don't know why it's still not more popular than it is. Maybe if you're an active player of Mabinogi right now, you could let me know down in the comments. That'd be really cool. Regardless, graphically, it is one of the only MMOs that utilize the style that it does, and interestingly enough, its combat is kind of a mixture of tab target and like a weird hybrid countering system. I don't know, it's difficult to really put into words. It's something that needs to be experienced. Since it's a lower population MMO, it doesn't really have much in the way of a PvP or PvE scene, but that doesn't mean there isn't much to do. There just aren't really many people to do it with. Granado Espada is an MMO that I wish I would have gotten further through, but every time I tried, I found myself busy with the channel and having too large of a workload to really pursue long term. Well, that and my addiction to World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV always pulled me back in with their damn content updates. Granado Espada, though, is probably one of the most beautiful MMOs I have ever seen. It doesn't have the best graphics, definitely, but it has such a unique style of graphics that I don't know, I couldn't take my eyes off of how gorgeous everything looked, the characters and their outfits as well. This is a setting that is often overlooked in MMOs, and I really find that disappointing, but I don't know, I feel like I'm going on a bit of a rant here. So the reason I listed Granado Espada in this isn't because it's stunning to look at, it's because if you haven't experienced its unique combat style, then I feel you really should take a few moments to download it and just see how unique it is. You recruit various characters found around the world into your party like you would a normal RPG, then they follow you in a battle and aid you, having several party members at any given time. I know, granted, this is something that happens all the time in normal traditional RPGs, but this is something that it doesn't really occur very often in MMOs, if ever. There's both a North American and a European version of the game though, so it's a little difficult getting a gauge on exactly how popular the game is, but when I played it a year ago, I definitely saw some players around low-level zones. Dungeon Fighter Online is a personal favorite of mine. I've poured quite a few hours into this game because it just has a lot of aesthetic appeal to me. Well, I mean, you know, it looks great in the action combat and it is probably the best I've ever seen in a side-scrolling MMO, but that's besides the point. The game looks ridiculously good. It's also one of, if not the highest grossing MMO in the entire world, with its player base being as high as several million concurrent players, I think. Honestly, you would not think it looking at the Steam charts. You see like maybe a couple hundred people playing it concurrently. The gross total of players though takes into account the entire world, including China and South Korea, where the game is probably more popular than Fortnite. Yes. Thankfully, with how popular it is worldwide, it gets a plethora of updates, looks incredibly polished, and plays like a AAA side-scrolling brawler. It is instance though, but not in the same way that most hub-based MMOs are. Where most hub-based MMOs take place in a specific city, Dungeon Fighter Online has you move between various areas depending on where you are in the story, and I think showcasing more of the world is always a good step in the right direction. As I mentioned though, the combat is the best in a side-scrolling MMO ever. Not only does it look incredibly flashy, but it is also highly impactful, and there are just so many damn classes to choose between. Secret World Legends. Man, this was such a missed opportunity. I love this game so much. It has some of the best voice acting in an MMO, which is actually the first time I've talked about the voice acting in a title thus far. It also has one of the coolest storylines I've ever played through. Well, I mean, it has 3 varying storylines, or 3 different paths you can take with the storyline, which is something you don't really see done in MMOs. Normally, because it's very difficult to script having different players in different instances of the same world. The game itself, though, takes place in the real world, no fantasy setting. Due to that, it doesn't necessarily look as visually stunning as other MMOs. I mean, there's really only so much you can do with normal buildings and such. But the graphics aren't necessarily where the game shines. Not only does it have a very compelling story and amazing voice acting, but it also has some pretty awesome tab target combat, or more of a free aim tab target combat system, but it is tab target nonetheless. The main drawback to me is the lack of players these days. When the game went free to play, it had such a strong player base, but people quickly grew tired of it. I'm honestly not sure why. I've always thoroughly enjoyed my time in it, but I mean, I guess everyone has their own taste, so yeah. Vindictus. The Black Desert before Black Desert was a thing. If Black Desert was a hub-based instance MMO, yeah, that's what Vindictus is. But that doesn't stop it from being a damn good game. Graphically, Vindictus looks absolutely stunning. It has realistic environments and incredibly beautiful characters, even if it does have 3 times more female characters than males. Well, I mean, I say 3 times, but honestly, that's being a little generous. If you're a fan of Black Desert Online, then Vindictus is essentially what Black Desert could be if it implemented dungeons and raids into the game. It's stunning, and to date, people still argue that Vindictus has a much better combat system than any other MMO out there. You can grapple things, people, monsters, you have interactable environments. It's an MMO that you haven't really seen before. Its story is a little overwhelming in terms of exactly how much text there is. I honestly often found myself skipping it because it just didn't really seem like it had much of a purpose, but I mean, then again, I haven't found many South Korean MMOs that really do narratives very well. That isn't to say that it isn't possible, just that I don't really see it. Thankfully, the game still has thousands of active players, so if this is something you're interested in trying, then now is a great time to jump back in. Do note though that this is a Nexon game, and Nexon are notorious for putting IP blocks in place. This actually prevents a lot of players outside North America from ever playing any of their games, Vindictus included. I do expect to see a few people in here complaining about this one, but I have played quite a lot of Tree of Savior recently, making it to over level 100 thus far, and as a fan of isometric MMOs, I am pretty hooked. Not only did I love Ragnarok Online, which Tree of Savior is supposedly referred to as the successor to, but I love the art style that the game utilizes. Seriously, this game is one of the most aesthetically stunning games I've ever played through. It's like playing on a living canvas. I cannot express how damn cool this game looks, but it plays just as good. The game utilizes complete action combat. I played as a mage, and I can tell you firsthand, the sheer destructive force I have is unreal. There are only a handful of MMOs with combat as good as Tree of Savior. While the game still has some optimization issues and the story is a little basic, the gameplay and visuals more than make up for it. Truly, if you haven't played this game, but you're a fan of isometric MMOs, then I urge you to give this one a shot. Granted, its player base is a little on the lower side right now if that's of issue to you. I know a lot of you guys have your own thoughts, your own lists of games that you deem should be included in this list. There are so many good games out there, and different games appeal to different audiences. It's actually kind of a blessing that I was given a platform like this with which I can communicate with all of you, because it allows me to get feedback from you, to hear your opinions on games that I may not have invested nearly enough time into, especially not having reached endgame, because, you know, with my limited time, I only have access to a limited number of games and therefore can't really push into endgame into many of them. And that's kind of why I enjoy this community so much. You're all just as big a part of it as I am. Your voices are equally as important. That's why, again, I want you to go down in the comment section and let me know of any MMOs that I missed that you believe should have been included. And again, I want you to let me know why that is. But that's just my opinion, my impressions of what the best free-to-play MMORPGs are right now in 2020. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below and let's talk about it. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you all next time.
Someday soon, I'm gonna make